All right. Next up is Joanna Merson, now at the University of Oregon.
Yes. Go Ducks. Wait, I've learned it. Throw the O.
Excellent.
Yes, but I'm actually speaking from work that I'm completing at Arizona State University as part of my dissertation. Quick caveat, they correctly shortened my extremely long title to put in the program and took out all the dry part of the title, which was, it said cartographic animation, but I'm looking at cartographic animation in academic geography using a journal content analysis. And where that came from was a conversation that I had with my advisor, where after coming to conferences such as this and seeing really great cartography work, said that the cartography community makes amazing animated maps, and that quickly became my obsession. But the techniques don't seem to disseminate into the broader geography community, and I was exactly that eloquent in our conversation. And she said, prove it, which meant, first, what did I mean by dynamic? I've had this conversation come up with a few people at the conference, and I see it when I hear people speak. They say I have a dynamic map, and they say I have an animated map. And that can mean very different things to different people. So what I'm talking about here is sometimes when we say dynamic, we're talking about what is being shown. So we might have static data that is sampled once in time, and we might have data that is intrinsically moving. It's kind of two separate categories, but we can take that static data, and if we show it over time, we can end up with something dynamic. Other times when people are talking about dynamic or animated, they're talking about how something is shown. And that might be because it's interactive, that the data itself isn't what's dynamic, it's the person that's being dynamic. It's how they're reaching into their screen and touching and moving. And sometimes it's passive process, and it's still a dynamic map. There's still something on the screen that's moving around and being animated. And that's something blinking or flashing in other categories we'll get into. And then, of course, as always, there's the combination of the two because nothing is binary in this world. We get flyovers and view changes. And so what I was focused on here was looking for this, how it is shown. And how do we do that in academic journals? How do we take this really incredible research that happens out there, and can we see the results? Is that actually displayed? In my mind, I know it's getting a little dated, but anybody familiar with the Harry Potter newspapers? With like the moving, that's where journals, I think, I would love to see them go. But before that can happen, I needed to make a case for saying that it's not happening, and that's what this was about. So I looked at 8 journals and was looking for some current uses, so going over 3 years, 2014, 2015, 2016, and started out with a keyword search looking for anyone that mentioned anything, interactive, time-lapse, animated animation, dynamic video. And the reason that these 8 journals were selected was that they are top impact factor geography journals if you search. And the reason that I went with those is that impact factor tends to be driving where a lot of people publish, the type of work that they do. And so while I know there are online journals that allow interactive, I wasn't looking for what is the cutting edge. I wanted to know what is the most used in geography if we step outside our bubble of really amazing cartography and get to the other people who could be using our techniques, but maybe aren't. So that ended up with 1,500 hits. That's a lot. So had to cull those down with the help of a lot of students, or a few students and a lot of work. We ended up going through them all and finding out that we excluded about 95% that weren't using anything that looked like any form of animated cartography was actually being used, and that was kind of what we expected, that it wasn't going to be there, and that was like, yay, I was right, I proved it. But I didn't get to end there. So the detailed analysis is more what I'm talking about here. And the categories, and then I also actually wanted to bring up, there was this huge thing of missed opportunities. Those were the ones that were just the most painful to me, and I just want to give you an example. This is a paper about using urban forest assessment tools to model bird habitat potential. So there's a list of cities, and there is habitat, which is a place, And this is the results were presented. There was not a single map in this entire paper, and this isn't like a first-year cartography class. Like, this is top-tier journal, and this is what's happening. And so I actually want to use this moment to really encourage people. We've been talking about reaching out to people to bring them into the cartography community, to come to our conferences and things like that. I know we've got the postcards for NACIS. I also want to encourage everyone to reach out to any colleagues that you have that are non-cartography and pour them a glass of cartography Kool-Aid. And animation's my thing. You might have a different thing, but if you're excited about it, that enthusiasm is contagious, and we can get away from spatial, let alone spatial temporal, which is being presented like that. So the content analysis that I went through looked for several specific themes. The research domain, of those who are actually using that academic animation or dynamic interface, what are they studying? What's the purpose? Why did they show it, or why did they use it? Was it exploratory? Was the animation part of their research process, or is it explanatory? They're just using it to share their results with the audience. How did they get it into that journal? Because we're not at Harry Potter land, although I know that's not what it's called. But how did they actually show it? What was the type of animation? That's the style of those initial categories that I showed. And as well, there's an interesting concept that we have in visualization about congruence, and that does what you're showing actually match up, and that extends from things like color right into animation of how is the movement, does the nature of the animation represent the nature of the phenomenon? There's actually a couple different arguments of whether or not you only want high congruence or not. There's some more I went into, but I'm not going to cover them as much in detail today, which were the spatial and temporal data structures. That was looking at, if we do have time represented, is it absolute or relative? Could that animation be any point in time? Or is it tied to a specific date, a specific place? Similar questions about the spatial data structure. Are we dealing with continuous space or discrete space? And the fun technical stuff, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about that in a lightning talk. And then further analysis on those missed opportunities, because those, I think, were the really interesting ones. Well, other interesting ones. So how I went through this was using a keyword and context style, which meant for each theme, there were specific categories to make this scientific and repeatable. And so an example here is using how is the animation presented. So some categories were they just use links, just a screenshot, or surprisingly enough, was it in text only? Was there a description that talked about some animation in the methods that they looked at and then didn't use at all, and we, the user, or the reader of the journal, never ever get to see it? And so an example would be, and it's a little tiny on my screen, but I know that it is an example in a paper where they mention that you can visit their website in order to see and theirs. And so that's kind of how we went through each of those categories, each of those themes. So some results to kind of show you, first off, the research domain. What was the research about? So looking at the keywords sort of produced, so the self-described keywords of the authors. What did they say they're researching? So this, of course, was driven by the journal selection. And again, as I mentioned, or maybe didn't mention, there was no specific cartography journals here, and that was on purpose. And so, speaking of purpose, so what was the purpose behind them? So almost every single hit that we found, or that I found, was used for an exploratory purpose. And then a few did double over, and they were using both exploratory and explanatory reasons for using their animation. And so here's an example of what some of the exploratory might have looked like. And this is an illustration of the model. We don't get to see the actual model, and this is an agent-based model showing communication between little agents running around. So there was an animation. I would love to see it. We do get the summary of the results and a little model showing it. The presentation type, so predominantly screenshots. We have a few publishers' links and a few personal links, and then a couple that really were just in the study. And what I really want to point out is it's mostly just screenshots. And you know there's this animation that has some interesting pattern, and they're trying to use their words to tell you what the pattern was, and all you get is a screenshot of it. And by the way, of those personal links, as of last night, I double-checked, 5 of the 11 are dead. So that's over half of things published within the past 3 years already dead. An example of what using the publisher's link looks like, a video is available in the supplemental materials. And then if you go below, You can find it at the end, and this is in landscape and urban planning. And if I got criticized in the past for not showing any animations, so I'm gonna do it. Oh, if it wants to flip over. All right, no, we might not. Maybe. Well, I can see it. I tested it. I knew this. I tested it. People that were here this morning saw it while I tested it. For the purposes of time, I'm not going to try and fiddle with that. I will be, of course, posting the slides like everyone else, and there is a link in there to a lovely animation showing a time lapse of heat in Arizona and how excruciatingly hot it gets during the day. And that was an excellent use of being able to display that animation through a reliable source that's persistent. And I missed your fingers. Where are you? I said I missed your fingers in my count. Done. Mine says 6.5. All right. So here's an example of what it looks like for the style being interaction facilitation. So an example of the really wonderful work that is going out there. That exists. And so the summary that I wanted to say, the strongest congruence was between those showing screenshots, or the co-occurrence of the multiple different categories, those showing screenshots of something that enabled an interaction facilitation for their data, so helped you pan and move it versus just passively watch it. And it was part of their exploratory work. So it was used to collect data as opposed to just share it with you. There was a low frequency, but I think a very high quality for those that were actually using it. And so the take-homes, I think, for you as an audience in the cartography community, make use of supplemental materials hosting by the publishers. Don't try and put it on your own website. If you might change universities in a year, if you might change companies in a year, if it's your own made-up URL, it might not be there in 1 year, let alone longer. Additionally, this extends to other cartographic work outside of just animation, which I'm interested in, so please reach out to your colleagues, even if you don't work at a university, and let's up that game, and let's push, and let's say the people writing, let's tell the editors that we want ways to be able to do better visualization in academic journals. Thank you.
Any questions for Joanna?
Des questions, s'il vous plaît?
Have you thought about doing a follow-up study by a survey for those folks to see why they don't